Welcome to Big Blend Radio, where we celebrate variety and how it adds spice to quality of life. Welcome, everyone. Today's show, we are so excited to welcome Clay Stauffer. He is the senior minister of Woodmont Christian Church in Nashville, Tennessee, and also teaches moral leadership at Vanderbilt University. His new book is out right now. It is called What the World Needs Now. And then I always hear that song in the back of my head is Love, Sweet Love. It's about virtue and character in an age of chaos. And you can get it now. Go to Amazon, all your favorite bookstores. Go to your local bookshop and ask them to carry it. You can also go to claystauffer.com. But Clay, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Lisa. Great to be with you.
And going through your book, it is so accessible. Did you write it in that way, in that intent?
Yes, it's 30 chapters, but the chapters are very short, and it is very accessible and leads to a lot of great conversation. That was the purpose when I worked with Abingdon to write it.
So tell us what led you to even think about writing a book like this.
Well, this book at the beginning talks about a lot of the challenges that our world faces, and we know what those are. And I list some of them at the beginning of the book. There's a lot of incivility, a political polarization, epidemic of loneliness, people starving for connection, too much anger, addiction to social media. And so I kind of go through all the things that we know. But then I wanted to shift and write a book that is a prescription providing the answers to a lot of the challenges that we face. And that's what I tried to do.
Yeah, the challenges are there. As you know, we travel the country and we see what the landscape is. We go to big, small towns, cities, all of it, and immerse ourselves in the communities as we go. And we get a lot of like, oh, you shouldn't go to this state because they believe that. And we're like, we're dealing with people one-on-one. And this is really, I think, where we kind of need to go back to. And people argue politics about where politicians went. And I go, well, sometimes people ignore areas, and that's part of our problem. So the polarization, I think, is really real as we travel, but as we see it. But if we're engaging one-on-one, it doesn't feel like what's going on the TV.
Well, it feels like we're in an age now where people are afraid to engage the conversation. We have a lot of echo chambers, so people feel safe around people that they know agree with them on either the right or the left, and we're not having the dialogue. And a lot of people don't even know where to go to have the dialogue, which is a problem in and of itself. And so I think people need to be much more intentional about doing the things that you encourage your listeners to do, which is travel around, go to different places, and have meaningful conversations with people who have experienced life in different ways.
And those conversations are important. And I see it from both sides where people only want to group with what they believe in, no matter if they're angry or trying to make positive change. I mean, on all sides, whether it's an environmentalist or someone wanting something to change in, healthcare or education, we've got a lot of good people wanting good things, right? And it seems like it becomes so hard to focus on that and then trying to still have these conversations with someone who may not believe that with you, and you think it's a waste of time or it's emotionally draining. And
well, one of the things I talk about in the book is the importance of emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence, kind of championed by Daniel Goleman at Harvard, has lots of different components: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, social skills. But we do live in a world that faces lots of challenges and people are exhausted, but that doesn't mean that we can just retreat and not talk about the things that matter. And so people need to talk about the important topics and also learn to listen to people who see the world differently, who've experienced the world differently. And that's what we've been moving away from. And that's not a good thing.
So what is happening in the world of faith and Christianity and church in those regards? Because we're also seeing, I think, a little bit of shift. You even mention it in your book that spirituality is part of our core, no matter whether it's Buddhism, Hinduism, Jewish, that kind of thing. And so we're moving away from it. I look at nature as being a huge part for me. That's me personally, right? But Absolutely. If you take that away from me, I'm a mess. So the spiritual core to me, are we losing that as a foundation?
Well, a lot of people will have issues with organized religion, but they will still say...
You turned it perfectly. Thank you.
They have issues with organized religion, but they still say, but I'm a spiritual person. The spiritual life matters. And I always say, yes. And I'm not sure that you can have organized religion away from spirituality. We're all spiritual beings. We all want to grow. We all have deep longings and hungers and this desire to be connected. And so I don't think you can have healthy faith, whether it's Christianity or any other religion, if you're not paying attention to your spiritual life and to the ways that you're growing spiritually. And a part of the way that we grow spiritually is through connection, through
Mm.
dialogue. Yes, getting out in nature, being in creation, the awe, the wonder of being outside, all of that is really powerful. But we have to pay attention to the reality that we need each other. We are social beings, we're social creatures, and we have to spend time engaging and talking about the things that matter. And we do face an epidemic of loneliness in our culture. And a lot of this has been driven by media, by the technology that's allowed us to connect on screens, but we have to remember that we also have to connect in person. Technology is a supplement, not a replacement for face to face interaction and face to face dialogue. And so I think everybody would say that their spiritual life matters. And I would argue, as a Christian minister, that when it comes to the Christian faith, spirituality is essential, and spiritual growth and depth is really important to who we are as people.
What do you feel now when things are really going wrong in regards to those disasters? I feel like I kind of chalk it all up to a word trauma. And we've done a lot of shows on those who are experiencing homelessness. And I keep going, why are, that's the big why. And then it's like, oh, we need to get rid of them. Oh, they're drug addicts. Oh, they're this. Oh, this blame thing starts. It's
Right.
an attack. And I'm going, well, some people used to back in the day just wanted to be, free, but there's, used to be, oh, they, those who are experiencing homeless came from Vietnam. They were in Vietnam War, and then it went in through our military. And then at one point back in 2008, 2000, oh, it was about 2012 actually, but it started in 2008. The average age of a homeless person was 9 years old.
Wow.
And so we're going, whoa. And now it's changed because of the opioid crisis that we have. And everyone I've interviewed and asked has said trauma and family disconnection is what is now happening. And obviously the opioid has a whole other reason of how that happened, right? But the family unit is kind of split up. Is that part of what's going on right now?
Yes, I think that's right. And I've actually said before that you can point to just about any problem that we face in our culture, and just about anything can be traced back to the breakdown of the family. That is a core problem that I think we're aware of. But it's also interesting that there was a book written by a guy named Johan Hari, who's a journalist, and it was called Lost Connections. And the basic argument in the book was that depression and a lot of mental illness, anxiety, depression, a lot of that is tied to chemical imbalance, yes, but trauma in one's life and losing connections with people that you love and that are important to you, that plays a huge role. And we see a culture full of people that have lost connections with people that they've known, whether it's family members or friends, and that's played a role in getting us to where we are today. So I would say, yeah, breakdown of the family, going through trauma, and losing connections with meaningful people in your life over time, you know, gets you to a place where you can feel hopeless, where you can feel isolated.
So, and right now we can really honestly say that this disconnect is leading to loss of life for sure. This is happening around, across the country, around the world. The arguments that war, it leads to war, right? I mean, we've
Right.
seen that throughout history, is that
Right.
disconnects. What would you say would be the first thing people can do to reunite maybe and have those conversations with those who you may love? But I've seen family and friends, it's like the Civil War again, kind of disconnect. How do they get back on the same page?
Well, a lot of times there's healing and forgiveness that needs to happen. People are really hurt or upset over something that somebody did or somebody said. And instead of talking it out and then letting it go, we hold on to it and then we just avoid that person. So healing, forgiveness, and then recognizing that, family members, friends, they're not going to agree on lots of things, politics being one of them, but other topics where we're just not going to have unanimity of opinion. But that doesn't mean that we can't talk about it. And we have to actively listen to other people who may feel differently than us, hear what they're trying to say, offer our opinion, and we don't always have to be right. We live in this culture where people feel like, well, I have to be right. I have to win the argument. You don't have to win the argument. I heard a therapist one time say, you can either be right or you can be in relationship. We need to choose relationship where we
Mm.
listen and where we hear other perspectives. but a lot of people aren't doing that. But in terms of reconnecting with people that we've known and loved, sometimes forgiveness and letting things from the past go, that has to happen so we can move on.
Mm. And then we also have really extraordinary events like Hurricane Helene. We've had shootings, which I know you have really counseled people and been there for families that have lost children and loved ones. I mean, our family has also lost loved ones in a shooting.
Yeah.
It is hard to go through, and there's a hopelessness that comes with this. Right now, as we talk, Texas has just gone through this really tragic, devastating flood, and loss of lives is still ticking. Any message for those who are going through it because you feel hopeless? And it's sometimes when you may need spirituality at the most. When something so tragic happens, you may turn your back to it because you like, why did God let this happen? I'm
Yeah.
just going to say it, right? Why did
Yeah.
God let this happen?
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the age-old question in the theology world. We call it theodicy. Why would an all-powerful and omnipotent God allow these things to happen? And people have been asking it for ages and for generations. I have a good friend in Houston, college friend, who sent two daughters to Camp Mystic, 11-year-old and a 9-year-old. The 11-year-old survived. The 9-year-old did not make it. And so I
Oh,
spent this past
sorry.
weekend talking to her and to other friends that we have. And yeah, the news coming out of the hill country in Texas, Kirk County, Hunt, that whole area is just devastating. And so all we can do is offer our love, offer our support, and then recognize that we don't do well when we try to handle any of these things by ourselves. That's when we feel helpless. We have to reach out to other people for strength, for help, for hope, and for reassurance.
Mm.
And so anybody tries to go through, whether it's a tragic flood like in Texas or North Carolina, or a shooting like we had here in Nashville, the Covenant School just down the street, people get through those times together. And so as our culture has become more self-absorbed and isolated, people don't feel like they have the friendships and the relationships to get through those really difficult times together. But we have to have each other to get through those difficult times. And that's always been true. We do better when we're together. We find hope and strength. And sometimes when we feel like we can't get up and press forward, there's other people that'll pick us up and carry us forward until we can be on our own again. And so in any of these situations, and life is full of hurts and pains and disasters and tragedies. I mean, we can list them, we know them, but we don't get through them by ourselves. We get through them together, which again, based on the work that you do, that's why building community, building relationships is so important.
And to go beyond the disaster, we've been through some disasters of, wildfires, things like that. And I mean, you see humanity come together, people you've never met, strangers helping strangers. And you go, wow, this is what we are. We've got this amazing, beautiful, just touching side of us all, this kindness out of the blue, right? And then all of a sudden, things pass. And then anger sets in after a disaster. There's all these emotions that come
Right.
after a disaster.
Right.
Pain is always there, and then PTSD can come. Everybody's different. Every disaster is different, but you see the heroes come out, and some heroes are just like normal. They just keep doing it, right? And
Right.
then we see like a community. We've been through a community where we went through a really massive disaster, and we saw people that were competing in a small town with each other to the point of stealing each other's business signs, right?
Yeah.
That kind
Wow.
of pettiness, I'm going to call,
Right.
carry on. And then they had to help each other during a disaster. And then we're like, oh, this is great. Maybe this is the positive of a disaster. Let's put it this way. That unity came out of this. And once the disaster is surpassed and all the drama kind of maybe 6 months later, the pettiness creeps in again.
Right.
And the side
Right.
drama starts again, right? I'm just
Right.
using this
Right.
as an example. So
Yes.
how do we maintain that beauty that we have to, we help each other and then suddenly it just gets forgotten? How do we make it a
Well,
habit?
isn't it interesting that anytime there is a disaster, whether it's a wildfire, a flood, school shooting, there is so much good that comes out of it. Doesn't mean that it needed to happen, doesn't mean that we wanted it to happen or it
Yeah.
should have happened. But the good of humanity, I mean, people do care. They do show up. They come out of the woodwork. They give money. They give time. After the Covenant tragedy in Nashville, I raised a bunch of money because I knew that the families who lost children and the families whose kids survived that were going to need counseling and therapy for a really long time. And so we raised a bunch of money and we paid for that for the next year and a half, maybe 2 years. And so I think what you're asking is we see the good, but the recovery from these things has to be sustained and prolonged. And then, yes, I mean, human nature is petty. People do get into it. When people are tired, when they're stressed, they do and say things that they regret. But we can't let that overshadow all the good that comes out of these situations and the people that do show up to help. And then we have to remember that it's not just at the time of need. I mean, right now in Texas, there's a lot of people that are there, helping with recovery, but the rebuild is going to take a long time. And the families that have lost children, they're never going to get over that. And
Yeah.
so the support and the strength and the money and the resources are going to be needed for a long time. And that's something we have to pay attention to. It's not just the immediate need, but it's the long need. And then, yes, when human beings do what human beings do, they get petty, they steal signs, they argue. That's just part of it, right? But let's not let that overshadow all the good that's out there.
Yeah, and I think we do. I think we have to kind of make a conscious, like when you talk about emotional intelligence, don't we need to make conscious decisions of how we act and how we react in a way? There's a reaction in survival mode. Like, yeah, we see something bad that's going to maybe hurt us. That's different. But there's an emotional intelligence that you can choose not to get in that argument.
Yeah, I quote Viktor Frankl in the book, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl survived the Holocaust. He was an Austrian psychiatrist. And one of the things that he says is that you do not choose all the things that come your way in life. You don't choose your circumstances, but you always get to choose if and how you're going to respond to it. And a lot of times people forget that. A lot of things we go through, we didn't choose it, we didn't want it. But it's always up to us how we're going to react or not react, or what we're going to say, or the tone we're going to use. And we have to remember that decision is always ours to make.
I think your book is so, like I said, accessible. I want libraries to have it everywhere. We need to save our libraries. I'm like on a mission for libraries across the country. They're so important because, not everybody can afford books. And
Right.
these books can keep transcending from person to person. And I think what's so great is the way you've written your book is that you do quote these amazing human beings who have written things before. You've got like Stephen Covey in there, and you're giving people, here's this, it's distilled, it's easy to get to right now as we need it. You could turn to a chapter. You can read it however you want to read your book, actually.
Right.
You can pick to a chapter. I need hope today. And hope, my gosh, hope can be fickle, man, if you don't have some kind of strength in there to keep you going, right? So you
That's
can
right.
turn to that chapter, but you give people this edge of, oh, well, let me find out who Stephen Covey is, or let me find out who this person is to go deeper. Did you
Right.
intend for that to get
Yeah,
people to go
yes. I mean,
further?
I'm a voracious reader and have read, I have a doctorate, I've read many different books, many different authors. And so I do try to provide lots of quotes and refer to different books that people can go, if they want to go further, they can take that. So you will find throughout the book, quotes and topics and further research ideas that you can do. But I think the way that we learn in life, and our culture is moving away from this, is we learn by reading, listening to podcasts, absorbing information so that we can then process it and decide what we think. And unfortunately, we now live in a culture that's being dumbed down to a large degree, where people don't read. They're not exposed to different ideas, different viewpoints, different worldviews. And, we've been reduced to this soundbite culture where people will watch something for 30 seconds, but they can't read a book. And so I try to, throughout the book, for one of the reasons that I wrote the book was shorter book with shorter chapters, is that I hope more people would read it. And you can read this book cover to cover, or you can pick out the chapters that you think will speak to you the most, and you'll get a lot out of it that way. So that was part of what I did with my publisher, was to make the book shorter and the chapters shorter. But we have to recognize that there are some incredible thinkers that have gone before us. There's incredible ideas, and that we have to be exposed to them, read them, so that we can process them and then decide how we think, how we feel, what our views are going to be. And so I do a lot of that in the book.
Yeah, I love that. And also, talk about faith and hope, and how you just even keep talking about really connecting with those who think and live differently and have come from different walks of life. And I wonder about that now. What is the state of people going to church? Because there was such a shift in beliefs of, gender equality goes into that. And, what people, it's like, even what happened in the Catholic Church kind of turned a lot of people. There were things, let's just put it that way, and
Listen,
that
yeah,
everybody should be accepted. I remember going to a church and when I lived in South Africa and seeing, a gentleman walked in and he was homeless and barefoot and he got turned away. And I
mm,
went, okay, well, I don't think I want to go here anymore. Now I was
right,
young. Now I probably would have opened my mouth, and said, hey, I was a little
right.
naive on that side. And also I was already in detention. So I had to keep quiet because I was in boarding school. So, and
Right.
listen, my knuckles, I told my mom today, I'm like, I'm getting arthritis in my knuckles. Well, the Catholic nuns in Kenya did that to me. But anyway, so I was always in trouble, but not bad trouble. But when you see things like that, it leaves a scar. And
Right.
I feel like is there a responsibility? Like they say, what is, famously, what are you doing for your country? Not just the leader.
Yeah. So you asked a question about church, and we've seen lots of shifts in the culture when it comes to church participation, church going. There's a lot of damage that's been done by organized religion, excluding people, judging people. One of the phrases that I love is everybody's welcome because nobody's perfect. We're all children of God. We all have our flaws. Even if
Mm,
people think that certain things are a sin, we should still welcome each other with open arms and not just say, well, this sin's okay, but that sin's not. But there's been a lot of judgment, a lot of damage. And I've referred to judgment as the Achilles heel of Christianity. Because while
mm,
we say we follow a guy that says, be loving, be forgiving, be kind, be compassionate, that's not the way that a lot of Christians act. And so that's problematic. People see a disconnect between the person that we claim to follow and the behavior of his followers. I was in Colorado a number of years ago. I lived out there during the summers during college and grad school. And I
mm,
was in a Grand Lake, Colorado, and I saw a guy walk in. He had a big T-shirt on. It said, "Jesus, please save me from your followers." And it
mm,
just always made me laugh because you remember what
yeah.
Gandhi said. Gandhi said that he would have been a Christian were it not for all the Christians. There has to be consistency, the way that we act, the way that we speak, with the person that we claim to follow. And
Mm,
so we do need to be welcoming. We do need to be warm.
mm.
And a lot of damage has been done with people that are shunned or judged because of who they are, how they look, how they dress.
Do you feel like all that is happening right now, the chaos, as you say in your book, right? And the trauma that we can learn through this? Like, I almost feel like we've gone beyond the boundaries, right? We stepped over the line in humanity. We've stepped over lines, and we do have also disasters that are happening a lot more frequently, natural disasters. So that gives us the ability to, like, hey, let me go do something. Let me not sit back. So right now we can go, okay, we've had a lot of missteps throughout humanity, quite frankly. And we could actually use this as let's turn it around and turn it around fast. And you talk about consistency and everything you were talking about the church. It goes with your very last part of your book is about character, which is something I really wanted to talk about because I almost feel like we as humans need to, and your book would be this awesome tool to do it, to look and go, who am I as a human being? What do I want to be? And if I want to be this character, how am I going to do it? It can't be just flippant. Like, I want to be a nice person. It's not good enough. We
Right.
actually have to actually do something to build
Yep.
character, right? You can't just say who you are. You have to do to build character.
Yeah, I don't think that we take character formation, moral formation as seriously as we once did. And so I say that in the book. David Brooks, New York Times columnist, and somebody whose writings have impacted me, he talks about the importance of character formation. He wrote a book called The Road to Character. And in that book, he talks about the difference between what he calls resume virtues and eulogy virtues. Resume virtues are the things that allow you to progress in the marketplace, your education, your experience, get a job, upward mobility, make more money. And we live in a culture that's kind of obsessed with resume virtues. But he says eulogy virtues are really what matter because eulogy virtues are the things that are talked about at your funeral. Were you a good person? Were you a good husband or wife, friend, brother, sister? Were you kind? Were you compassionate? Were you loving? Were you a good mother or father? We have this culture that's obsessed with resume virtues and how can I get a promotion and make more money? But really, we should be more about who am I becoming as a person? And so, a lot of the work that I do at Vanderbilt, the preaching that I do, the teaching that I do at Vanderbilt is about character formation, and that does you can't just leave that to chance. You have to be intentional about that. Character formation doesn't happen overnight. You have to work on it. You have to identify your core values. You have to identify the type of person that you want to become. You need to have friends and mentors that will help lead you along that path. And I don't think that our culture at large is as intentional about that as it used to be.
And do you think if we do it individually, that it's something that you do then as a family? You work on yourself, and then you also look at it as a family, and then you look at it as community. And when I say community, it's not just regional communities. It could
Right.
be that, hey, we all like this type of music, but what are you going to do that goes beyond, all going to listen to a musician together or something?
Right.
Community is about its unity, right? And it's coming together. That's how I look at it.
Right. No, that's right. Yeah. I mean, we talked about the breakdown of the family. And I do think that for anybody, where you first learn right from wrong, character formation, values happens in the family, but it goes beyond that. And I think that with our young people, we have to be much more intentional about teaching some of these things at a younger age. And not just, and everybody comes from different families. Some families are really good at talking about this, other families are not. Some people are religious and they get their values from Christianity or Judaism. Other people are not. And I don't think you have to be a religious person to have values, but I
Mhm.
do think that you have to be very focused on the types of values you believe in and the type of person that you want to become. And so the road to character is long, but it starts early.
Mhm.
And I think that our culture at large has shifted into this kind of it's all about me and what I want, instant gratification, self absorption, self promotion, and that's not good when you think about the fact that the best way to live your life is to connect with other people, to serve other people, to help other people. But now we live in this very self-absorbed culture, which, like we already said, is very lonely, very isolated, and we need to remind people that it's about connection. Jonathan Haidt is somebody that I would recommend to your listeners. Jonathan Haidt teaches at NYU. He's written a bunch of great books over the years. His most recent book was called The Anxious Generation, where he's documented what social media and smartphones is doing to our children. But he also wrote a book called The Happiness Hypothesis. And he says there's kind of three theories of happiness. One is that happiness comes from getting and achieving, acquiring, get a raise, get a promotion, get a new car. He says that's true, but it's short lived. The second one is that happiness comes from within, which is more of the Buddhist mindset where you can kind of block out desire. And he says that's okay, but it's incomplete. Ultimately, what he concludes in that book is that happiness comes from between. It comes from the
Mm.
networks and the relationships and the systems and the communities that we build. And that's where meaning and fulfillment and joy are actually found. Happiness comes
Mm.
from between. And I really liked the point that he made there.
I think you're absolutely right. Well, he's right. You're both right on this because it's those little steps. It's the stepping stones, right, that happen. And
Right.
it's for us to actually acknowledge it. And sometimes we let the negative stuff overwhelm those little steps that happen all the time.
That's
So
right.
I think it's that acknowledgement, but because our eye is always on the prize, and if it's not going in alignment with this goal to get this new car or whatever it is, we step aside from those core things that make us happy, like what you're saying, you know?
Well, life is stressful.
It
It's
is.
full of things that get our blood pressure up, and people are impatient and people are rude. And so there's it's almost like every time we turn around, we have a chance to practice our patience, to hold our
Mm.
tongue. And so you know the the spiritual life, as we were talking about, it's what is happening inside your heart, and it's where is your mind, where is your heart, and you can't react to everything that the world throws at you because it's going to throw things at you all the time. And so spiritual life and being spiritually centered and grounded, in the Christian tradition we talk about the fruit of the spirit. These are the things we're supposed to live, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, self control. Those things happen when we first have peace with ourselves and we don't react and respond to everything that's going on in the world because
Mm.
we can't.
Yeah.
We want to help, we want to serve, but we can't walk around on edge, angry, stressed out, tired. But so many people do.
Yeah, that's true. And the other part I wanted to touch on, which is also covered in the book, is forgiveness. Right now, we're seeing from just a lot of people I know telling me about it and past interviews, a generation of ghosting people, just
Hmm.
cutting them out.
Yep.
In families where parents don't know why their kids just, that's it, you're out. You didn't,
Yep.
maybe they did one thing that they didn't like instead of even arguing about. I mean, arguing would be better at this point, and that's normal behavior, but, not when it goes to extreme. But there is this ghosting thing. I see it in business relationships. It's just this underlying quiet trend that is ghostly,
Yeah.
So what can we do to maybe prevent that and use communication and maybe, yeah, I don't want to be around this person this much anymore. So you can settle it, but you do this absolute disconnect from someone who has no idea why you've been disconnected. It's mean.
Yeah, yeah, you use the phrase ghosting. We live in a cancel culture where people try to cancel you, ghost culture where people just stay away from you. And, I've referred to forgiveness as a recipe for survival.
Mm.
That, Christians are really good at talking about forgiveness and praying for forgiveness, but they're not really good at forgiving. But without forgiveness, I don't know if you can have relationships. If you hold something over somebody's head days, months, years later, if you continue to not let that go, not forgive somebody, then you're going to have a really hard time having a relationship. But if you want to be forgiven, you have to forgive. And so I've
Mm.
equated to like climbing up a mountain and you have a backpack and you keep putting rocks in the backpack, big rocks, rock after rock. Sooner or later, you're going to be carrying too much to where you can't keep climbing. Well, that's what happens if you fail to forgive. And if you fail to just let things go, you fail to have that conversation with the family member or the friend and say, hey, I want to leave that in the past. And the other thing is, a lot of times people, they don't even know that they need forgiveness. So you may have to forgive somebody who doesn't really think that they did anything wrong. They hurt you, they said something and you need to forgive them even though they're not asking for it.
Yeah, it feels better, doesn't it?
That's right.
It feels better.
That's
You
right.
can climb that mountain, get to your
Or
goals.
yeah,
And
that's right.
yeah.
Or you can keep adding to that backpack until you can't keep going. And
Do
that's what a
you
lot of
think
people do.
all of this also manifests into our physical being? Like, why are we all with high blood pressure at a certain point of our age? Like, are we carrying anger, which eventually manifests into heart disease and addiction and overeating? And so, what we're doing with these emotional parts and not really focusing on the moral part and the character building, the
Right.
forgiveness side, is
Right.
actually manifesting into some really negative things personally.
Yeah, well,
Bodies.
absolutely. It has physical manifestations, right? Stress, anger, fear, anxiety, all of that stuff manifests itself in your health. I heard a counselor once say, after this person had been years of marriage and family counseling, and he said, I am convinced that resentment and bitterness leads to an early death. And he was basing that on people that he had worked with that were so resentful, so angry, so bitter, they didn't let things go, and ultimately said it killed them. And I think that that's true. I think that our spiritual, mental, and physical health are all intertwined.
Mhm.
And when we don't let things go, we don't forgive, we don't reconcile, then it has a physical effect. And I think you can look around and see that. And so all of that is tied together. And I think we have to remember that.
Mm. So call your friend, call your family that you have. And I feel like everyone should pick up the phone today. I kind of
Right.
wish we had those big phones. I think that used to be a big thing, like, and like Sunday dinners were a big thing of
Yeah.
unity, those kinds of things. And I think the pandemic, when we talk about community, the pandemic realized, us humans realized how much we do need each other, how we
Right.
miss a hug, a handshake, all
Right.
of that. And then look, after that, so a year in, once we're all free from the COVID jail, off we
Mhm.
go. And then what? We're starting to go right back to where we were. That's kind of
Right.
what I was saying. And so your book, I think, brings us a good dose of reality and in a way that's tangible for us to move forward, not to get upset again, not to, all right, yes, we've made mistakes. So we're allowed to forgive ourselves too for our mistakes, right? That's a
That's
good one.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
and again, in the book, I mean, I appreciate you saying that, but I really did want to provide answers and solutions to
Mm-hmm.
what I think our world does need now. And yeah, love, sweet love is one of the answers. It's one of the
Yes.
chapters, but there's lots of other things. And I think that we need to pay attention to, our own role and responsibility in making the world a better place, and
Mm-hmm.
not just sitting around and waiting on somebody else to go and do it. That we play a role in healing relationships, spreading love, spreading light, spreading peace. And we can't just sit back and expect for somebody else to do it. The pandemic was so hard on so many levels, but you're exactly right. It reminded us that we are social creatures, we are social beings, and we do long for connection. And when we were forced to be apart, that was really hard. And we took it for granted. We took the fact that we could meet and have dinner and, worship and gather. We took that for granted. And so I think people did get a new perspective, but it didn't take long until we were back, hustling about doing our thing. And again, I think one of the problems today and it's the result of technology. And is it people just spend so much time by themselves on their phones on their tablets, on their screens, and we need to connect more face to face. There's something that happens when you're in a face to face meeting with people that you cannot replicate on the screen.
COVID church wasn't as good, was it?
I mean, live stream church was better than nothing, but it's not the same.
No, it's like going to a music performance versus,
That's right.
it was like,
right.
at least we could keep up with our musicians and for those who believe, in church and things like that. So there was great to have technology, but it does. And we're like, you're saying those sound bites, it's like this addictive thing that's going on. But getting out, one thing I really want people to get is we're all here for a reason. Okay. And part of our life is to figure that out too. But if we don't participate, that's the death of us. We're killing ourselves.
That's right.
By not participating. And I think your book, the biggest message I got from it is to participate, even if you're wrong in your participation, because you can fix that. But you need to do something. You can't just sit in life and let the world go by, because then you are a victim of circumstance.
Well, you got to show up. You have to be involved. But you also have to be, selective in terms of what you think your purpose is. You can't do everything. I say some people are spread, a mile wide and an inch deep. They're taking on too much. And so you got to know what your priorities are. You got to know what kinds of relationships you want to have in your life and the kinds of people that you want to be around. Hopefully they're people that tell you the truth and they are honest and they love you for who you are. But you can't do everything. So you got to show up, but you got to show up for the things that matter. And then sometimes you got to learn to say no to the things that you might like to do, but you just can't do.
That's character. That's what I mean about building character, is about participating, Right. It really is. I love that. Well, thank you so much. Number one, for writing the book, and everyone go get it. It is a wake up call, right? That's the first chapter there, but it's called What the World Needs Now, Character and Virtue in an Age of Chaos. Again, by Clay Stauffer, and you could go to claystauffer.com, but go get the book on Amazon, all those great places. Go to your bookstores, just saying. But thank you so much for joining us here today. It's been a pleasure having you on and refreshing. And now I feel like I need to go call a friend.
Well, Lisa, thank you for having me on. Thank you for all the great work that you're doing, building community, traveling around, building bridges and relationships. And it was a joy to talk to you today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio. Keep up with our shows at bigblendradio.com.